Imagine for a moment that killing a cat was considered as serious a crime as murdering royalty, punishable by death itself. It seems absurd today, doesn't it? But more than 3,000 years ago, in the heart of ancient Egypt, this wasn't just reality. It was accepted and respected by an entire civilization that built pyramids and deciphered the secrets of the stars. Why would such an advanced and sophisticated society go to such extremes over simple domestic cats? The answer takes us on a fascinating journey through the deepest mysteries of the human mind, ancient spirituality, and secrets that were buried with the pharaohs in the sands of time. The truth about feline reverence in ancient Egypt is far more complex and surprising than any legend you've ever heard. Today, you'll discover not only why this extraordinary devotion existed, but also how it shaped one of the most powerful civilizations in human history. If you want to understand the mysteries that connect the sacred to the everyday, subscribe to the channel right now to support our work in bringing these forgotten stories back to light, because what you're about to discover will completely change your perception of the relationship between humans and animals in antiquity. To truly understand why cats achieved an almost godlike status in ancient Egypt, we must first transport ourselves to a world completely different from our own, where the line between the sacred and the profane was as thin as the desert breeze that swept across the Nile's waters. We're talking about a civilization that flourished for more than 3 millennia, from approximately 3100 BC to the Roman conquest in 30 BC. This period was so vast that when Cleopatra ruled Egypt, she was temporally closer to the first moon landing than to the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza. In this ancient world, every aspect of daily life was intrinsically connected to the divine. The Egyptians developed one of the most complex and sophisticated cosmologies humanity has ever known. They didn't see nature as something to be mastered or exploited, but as a direct manifestation of the gods, where each animal, plant, and natural phenomenon carried within itself a portion of the creative power that had given rise to the universe. This was a society where the pharaoh wasn't just a king, but a living incarnation of the god Horus, and where priests weren't simply religious leaders, but guardians of ancestral knowledge that connected the world of the living to the realm of the dead. Within this extraordinary context, cats weren't just pets or pest controllers, but creatures that, through their unique characteristics and mysterious behaviors, captured the imagination and reverence of an entire people. They became living symbols of fundamental concepts in Egyptian philosophy: protection of the home, fertility, motherhood, hunting, the moon, and perhaps most importantly, the delicate balance between order and chaos that Egyptians believed governed not only their earthly lives but the entire cosmos. What you're about to discover is how these elegant felines managed to not only win the hearts of the Egyptians, but also secure a permanent place in the pantheon of gods, influencing rituals, laws, art, and even the politics of antiquity's most enduring empire. The history of feline reverence in ancient Egypt begins long before the great dynasties we know today. In the mists of the pre-dynastic period, when the first farming communities settled along the Nile's banks around 600 BC. In this primordial epoch, when writing hadn't yet been invented and traditions were transmitted only through rituals and oral narratives, the ancestors of the Egyptians had already noticed something extraordinary about the African wild cats that roamed the great river's floodplains. These felines, known scientifically as Felis libica, possessed a unique combination of characteristics that made them not only useful, but truly magical in the eyes of those early nature observers. Picture the scene. Entire families of primitive farmers watched in fascination as these elegant, silent predators emerged from the shadows at dusk, moving with supernatural grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Their eyes glowed in the darkness like small earthly stars, reflecting moonlight in a way no other animal could replicate. Even more impressive was their seemingly supernatural ability to detect and eliminate the pests that constantly threatened stored grain, ensuring the difference between life and death for entire communities that depended on their crops to survive the long months of drought. But something even deeper was happening in this primordial relationship between humans and felines. The ancient Egyptians were extraordinarily keen observers of nature, and they quickly realized that cats possessed abilities that transcended the merely physical. These animals seemed capable of perceiving things that completely escaped human senses. They reacted to earthquakes before anyone could feel them, detected poisonous snakes hiding in places no human would dare look, and demonstrated an almost prophetic ability to predict changes in weather and their environment. For a culture that firmly believed the visible world was just a superficial layer of a much more complex and mysterious reality, these feline abilities were clearly evidence of a special connection to the realm of spirits and gods. The transformation of wild cats into domestic companions didn't happen overnight, but was a gradual process that unfolded over thousands of years, parallel to Egyptian civilization's development. During the Old Kingdom period, roughly between 2686 and 2181 BC, when the first pyramids were being built and hieroglyphic writing was being refined, cats had already become a constant presence in Egyptian homes. But they weren't treated as simple domestic animals in the modern sense. They were considered family members, beings worthy of respect and reverence, creatures who had chosen to share their lives with humans not out of necessity, but for some higher divine purpose. During this crucial period, the first artistic representations of cats began appearing in Egyptian tombs and temples. And these images tell us much about how these animals were perceived by society. They weren't portrayed as submissive or domesticated creatures, but as proud, independent beings who chose to interact with humans on their own terms. In wall paintings of nobles and pharaohs' tombs, cats often appear sitting under their owners' chairs during elaborate banquets, not as beggars waiting for crumbs, but as silent guardians watching everything with their piercing, mysterious eyes. It was during the Middle Kingdom period, between 2055 and 1650 BC, that reverence for cats began taking on truly religious characteristics. This was a period of great cultural and spiritual renewal in Egypt, when ancient traditions were rediscovered and reinterpreted, and when the pantheon of Egyptian gods began taking on the more elaborate forms we know today. It was during this time that one of the most important figures in all Egyptian mythology emerged: Batet, the cat goddess who would become the center of one of the most popular and enduring cults in the entire ancient world. Batet wasn't simply a cat-headed goddess, as she's often described in modern textbooks. She was an extremely complex deity who embodied multiple aspects of human and cosmic experience. In her earliest depictions, she appeared as a ferocious lioness, associated with the sun's destructive power and the violent protection of the innocent. But gradually, as Egyptian society became more sophisticated and urbanized, Batet evolved to take on the gentler, more domestic form of the cat, retaining all her divine power but expressing it through more nurturing and protective qualities. Bastet's evolution from lioness to domestic cat reflects a fundamental transformation in Egyptian society itself. During the earliest and most tumultuous periods of Egyptian history, when survival often depended on the ability to wage war and defend territory, the leonine deities represented the brute force needed to protect people from external enemies and nature's chaotic forces. But as Egypt became more prosperous and stable, everyday concerns turned more toward protecting the home, women's fertility, children's health, and maintaining domestic harmony. And who better to represent these values than cats? Creatures who demonstrated daily their devotion to protecting their offspring, their ability to keep homes free of pests, and their capacity to bring peace and comfort through their mere presence. The cult of Batet quickly spread throughout Egypt, but it was in the city of Bubastis, located in the Nile Delta, that it found its most important spiritual center. Bubastis became one of the most prosperous and visited cities in all of ancient Egypt, attracting pilgrims from all parts of the empire and even from distant lands who came to pay homage to the cat goddess. The temple of Batet at Bubastis was considered one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world, a magnificent structure surrounded by artificial channels that made it appear as a sacred island emerging from the delta's waters. Herodotus, the great Greek historian who visited Egypt in the 5th century BC, left us a fascinating description not only of Bastet's temple, but also of the extraordinary festivals held in her honor. According to Herodotus, these annual festivals attracted more than 700,000 pilgrims, making them the most popular religious events in the entire Mediterranean world. During these festivals, which lasted several days, the entire city was transformed into a gigantic celebration of life, fertility, and joy, with music, dancing, elaborate banquets, and intricate rituals that honored both Batet and the sacred cats that lived in her temple. But the Batet festivals were much more than simple religious celebrations. They represented a unique cultural expression of values that were at the heart of Egyptian civilization: the importance of family, reverence for fertility and motherhood, appreciation of beauty and grace, and the fundamental belief that joy and pleasure weren't only permissible but essential to a spiritually fulfilling life. At a time when many cultures viewed physical pleasure and celebration as sinful or spiritually dangerous, the Egyptians embraced the idea that the gods wanted their devotees to be happy and prosperous. The cats that lived in Bastet's temple weren't only religious symbols, but living oracles through which the goddess communicated her will to mortals. Specially trained priests observed every movement, sound, and behavior of the sacred cats, interpreting their actions as divine messages on issues ranging from national politics to individual devotees' domestic problems. These cats were fed the finest available food, slept in luxurious beds, were adorned with precious jewelry, and received medical care that often surpassed what was available to humans themselves. Reverence for cats in ancient Egypt reached its peak during the New Kingdom period, especially under pharaohs such as Akhenaten and his successor, the legendary Cleopatra VII, when legal protection of these animals became so strict that it bordered on the absurd by modern standards. During Psamtik I's reign in the 7th century BC, a law was enacted making the killing of a cat, even accidentally, a crime punishable by death. This wasn't a symbolic or rarely enforced law, but a legal reality documented by multiple historical sources that resulted in actual executions of people who, through misfortune or ignorance, caused a feline's death. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus tells us an extraordinary story that perfectly illustrates the seriousness with which these laws were applied. During a Roman diplomatic visit to Egypt, a Roman soldier accidentally killed a cat while trying to scare the animal away from his tent. Despite vehement protests from Roman ambassadors, who argued it was an accident involving a citizen of an allied nation, Egyptian authorities insisted the law must be enforced. The soldier was tried and publicly executed, an event that nearly caused a diplomatic crisis between the two powers and clearly demonstrates that for Egyptians, a cat's life had sacred value that transcended political or diplomatic considerations. But legal protection was only the tip of the iceberg of an extraordinarily complex cultural system that had turned cats into a social and economic force of staggering proportions. During Egypt's most prosperous periods, breeding and trading cats became one of the empire's most lucrative industries. Noble families competed to possess the most beautiful and rare cats, and prices paid for especially desirable specimens could rival those of trained slaves or precious artworks. There were specialized breeders who developed specific cat strains with particular physical characteristics, anticipating modern selective breeding techniques by thousands of years. International trade in Egyptian cats became so valuable that the government implemented strict laws against their export, treating these animals as national treasures that couldn't be removed from the country under penalty of death. Phoenician and Greek traders, however, developed elaborate smuggling networks to satisfy growing demand for Egyptian cats in other parts of the Mediterranean world. These animals were considered not only desirable companions, but living talismans that brought good luck and divine protection to their owners. An Egyptian cat's value in Athens or Rome's markets could equal the price of a modest house, and owning one became a status symbol among elites throughout the ancient world. The death of a domestic cat in ancient Egypt triggered mourning rituals that were surprisingly elaborate and emotionally intense. When a cat died, the entire family entered a period of official mourning that could last up to 70 days, the same period reserved for pharaohs and other royalties' deaths. Family members shaved their eyebrows as an outward sign of grief and wore special clothing indicating their bereaved status. The cat's body was carefully mummified using techniques essentially identical to those employed to preserve human bodies, with the animal wrapped in fine linen, adorned with protective amulets, and sometimes even fitted with elaborately decorated funerary masks. Ancient Egypt's feline cemeteries were impressive necropolises that rivaled the most important human sepulchres in grandeur. The Bubastis Cat Cemetery, excavated by modern archaeologists, has revealed hundreds of thousands of feline mummies buried in elaborate underground complexes stretching for miles beneath the holy city. Each mummy was accompanied by funerary offerings including small pots of milk, mummified mice to feed the cat in the afterlife, and even precious jewelry that demonstrated the love and respect their human owners felt for them. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the relationship between Egyptians and cats was the belief that these animals possessed specific magical powers that could be harnessed through elaborate rituals and incantations. Magical papyri that have survived to the present describe complex spells using cat hair, feline claws, and even cat urine as essential ingredients for potions promising everything from curing diseases to protection from enemies and love spells. Cats were considered particularly powerful in protecting against snakes and other dangerous animals, and many Egyptian homes maintained small shrines dedicated to Batet where regular offerings were made to ensure the family's cats remained healthy and able to protect their homes. The cat's influence extended even to the highest spheres of Egyptian politics. Multiple pharaohs adopted feline symbols in their names and titles, and some even built entire temples dedicated to their favorite personal cats. Cleopatra VII, Egypt's last pharaoh, was known to travel with an entourage of sacred cats, and her diplomatic dealings often included elaborate feline-related gifts. When she met Julius Caesar in Alexandria, one of the first things she did was present him with a specially trained cat as a symbol of the alliance between Rome and Egypt. Christianity's arrival in Egypt marked the beginning of the decline in cat reverence, but this process was surprisingly slow and met significant resistance from the local population. Early Christian missionaries in Egypt reported enormous difficulties converting Egyptians, not only because of their devotion to traditional gods, but specifically because of their refusal to abandon their sacred cats. Many Egyptian converts secretly continued practicing feline rituals, and modern archaeological discoveries have revealed early Christian churches built over Batet temples that continued housing cats as part of their local traditions. The final blow to Egyptian feline reverence came not with Christianization, but with the Arab conquest of Egypt in the 7th century AD. Muslim conquerors, while generally tolerant of local traditions, viewed cat worship as a form of idolatry incompatible with Islamic teachings. Many temples dedicated to Batet were converted into mosques, and ritual practices involving cats were gradually suppressed. However, even under Islamic rule, cats maintained special status in Egyptian culture, and to this day Egypt has one of the world's largest populations of stray cats, a living heritage of thousands of years of feline reverence. The discovery and excavation of Egypt's feline necropolises in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed the true extent of Egypt's obsession with cats. Archaeologists such as Flinders Petrie discovered cemeteries containing literally millions of cat mummies, evidence of a practice spanning more than 2,000 years and involving virtually every segment of Egyptian society. These discoveries were so voluminous that, ironically, many feline mummies were sold as fertilizer to English farmers, a tragically ironic fate for creatures once considered sacred. When we look back through the millennia separating us from ancient Egypt and try to truly understand what it meant for an entire civilization to elevate cats to divine status, we're forced to confront profound questions about humanity's nature itself and our relationship with the natural world around us. Egyptian feline reverence wasn't simply a cultural quirk or primitive superstition, as some past historians have tried to characterize it, but rather a sophisticated expression of values and insights that were perhaps wiser and deeper than anything our modern society has developed. The ancient Egyptians understood something that we, in our technological hubris, often forget. Animals aren't just resources to be exploited or entertainment to be consumed, but sentient, conscious beings who possess their own forms of intelligence, their own perspectives on the world, and their own valuable contributions to life's complex fabric on Earth. When they observed a cat moving silently through their home, protecting grain reserves from destructive rodents, or when they saw a cat tenderly caring for her young, they recognized in these behaviors not only practical usefulness, but manifestations of divine qualities that deserved respect and reverence. In our contemporary world, where species extinction occurs at breakneck speed, where natural habitats are destroyed in the name of economic progress, and where billions of animals are treated as production machines on factory farms, there are perhaps profound lessons to be learned from those ancient cat worshippers. They understood that our prosperity as a species is intrinsically linked to the well-being of all other life forms with which we share this planet, and that treating animals with cruelty or indifference is ultimately a form of violence against ourselves. The history of cats in ancient Egypt also teaches us about the transformative power of careful observation and genuine wonder. When Egyptians looked at a cat, they saw not just a domestic animal, but a silent teacher who could instruct them about grace, independence, intuition, maternal protection, and the delicate art of living in harmony with forces beyond our direct control. They learned to value qualities such as patience, attention to detail, the ability to remain calm in dangerous situations, and the importance of balancing personal independence with loyalty to those we love. Perhaps the most relevant aspect of Egyptian feline reverence for our times is its demonstration that it's possible to build a prosperous and lasting society based on principles of mutual respect between different forms of life. Ancient Egypt endured for more than 3,000 years, longer than any other civilization in human history, and for most of that period, protecting and venerating cats was a central feature of their culture. This was no coincidence, but evidence that societies valuing life in all its forms tend to be more stable, more creative, and better able to face the challenges that time inevitably brings. The final lesson we can draw from this extraordinary story is about the power of reverence itself. When we treat any aspect of the natural world with true respect and admiration, when we stop seeing nature as something to be mastered and begin seeing it as something to be celebrated, we discover dimensions of meaning and beauty that transform not only our understanding of the world, but our very experience of being alive. The Egyptians found in the simple act of observing and honoring cats a source of artistic inspiration, spiritual insight, and practical wisdom that enriched their lives in ways we can still admire and envy thousands of years later. If you've made it this far and haven't subscribed yet, take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share in the comments what you think of this journey through ancient Egypt's mysteries and its fascinating reverence for cats.